system, the human endocrine system. So I would love the learners to follow on page 16, where we're going to discuss all of the things following the human endocrine system in the learner package. Now, the endocrine system. First, you need to know that there's a difference between an endocrine gland and an exocrine gland. If you look in your notes, endocrine glands, they are ductless glands that release secretions, specifically hormones. I want you to highlight in your package, they are secreting hormones directly into the bloodstream. Exocrine glands, these are glands that release their secretions through ducts to the body cavity or outside. Example, salivary glands that secrete saliva. Endocrine glands, grade 12s, are the glands we're going to discuss today. Now, I mentioned that they secrete hormones. So you need to know what hormones are. They are chemical messengers. They are also organic compounds. Most hormones are proteins. And hormones are secreted by endocrine glands in small quantities in the bloodstream. Highlight, grade 12s, highlight. Hormones secreted by endocrine glands in small quantities. Now, the hormones, they are transported to target organs. Now, this word target organs, you'll hear this morning quite a few times, because the hormones then are transported to the target organs where they have a specific effect. And this effect, they regulate by stimulating or inhibiting a certain function. They stimulate that something needs to happen, or they inhibit something needs to stop happening. Now, grade 12s, you should know the location of endocrine glands and the specific hormones that they secrete. Now, the endocrine glands that we're going to discuss today is starting with, should know where the pituitary gland is. A different name for the pituitary gland, the hypophysis, thyroid gland, the adrenal gland, the pancreas, and then the reproductive glands, which we discussed fully in the reproductive system, the ovaries and the testes. Now on page 17, grade 12, you'll see there's a diagram, figure 7.1. This diagram is in your mind, okay? So let's go through this diagram. Remember, earlier I said that you need to know the endocrine gland, the specific hormone, and to add to that, just when we're going to discuss later on negative feedback, also know which target organ, where does this hormone go to regulate a certain effect. So the hypothalamus, which is inside your brain, is what the first gland we're going to look. We're going to go clockwise. And go clockwise. Hypothalamus, the hormone it secretes is ADH, antidiuretic hormone. Target organ, the kidney. Function, as I said, gland, hormone, and what's its function? ADH controls the concentration of water in the bloodstream. Then the pituitary gland, or another word for pituitary gland, the hypophysis. Which hormone? GH, the growth hormone. It controls growth, that's its function. Which hormone? TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. A clue, grade 12, sometimes or most of the times, the hormone tells you its function. So TSH function, it stimulates the thyroid gland to secrete thyroxine. There's the thyroid gland, the thyroid gland hormone, TSH. Then the reproductive hormones, which you all already know, also the gland, the pituitary gland or hypophysis. The reproductive hormones are FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, LH, luteinizing hormone, prolactin. Now, the hormone FSH, as you already know, stimulates the development of the follicle in the ovaries, the Gravian follicle. LH, luteinizing hormone, stimulates ovulation and stimulates the development of the corpus luteum. Prolactin, the hormone, stimulates the mammary glands to secrete milk. That's the pituitary gland. You need to know which gland and which hormones it secretes with their functions. Then the pancreas, there's the pancreas. The isles, specifically the Isles of Langerhans. The pancreas, which is an endocrine gland and also an exocrine gland. Glucagon, the hormone glucagon, function stimulates the conversion of glycogen to glucose. I will just ask that whoever's mic is on, please, when we join, that we please put off our mics so that it doesn't create an echo for other schools. We are on page 17. We are discussing the different endocrine glands and which hormones they secrete. I'll just ask again, can you please put off our mics because it creates an echo so everyone can hear clearly. Thank you very much.
I'm glad you are here. I know that you are preparing for that Euclidean geometry, analytical geometry, and trigonometry. So a lot of things that you have one had a week to prepare. You had a week to prepare for this math. I'm not saying that you should. I'm just glad that you are here. That I didn't come for nothing, God said, because I'm driving from that side of town. At school, do not pay me. I don't claim money.
Okay, let's go back to our slide. As I was saying, that the pancreas is one of the glands and the hormones it secretes is glucagon, and it stimulates the conversion of glycogen, which is stored glucose, to glucose, which increases the blood glucose levels. Then insulin, the second hormone, stimulates the conversion of glucose to glycogen. Grade 12s, we tend to get confused between the stored sugar glycogen and the hormone glucagon, but we'll discuss that later on. Then the two reproductive glands, the testes and the ovaries. Testes, hormone is testosterone, function stimulates the maturation of sperm cells and puberty in males. The ovaries, hormone, it secretes estrogen and progesterone. Estrogen stimulates puberty and the thickening of the endometrium in females, and progesterone promotes also the thickening of endometrium and maintains pregnancy. Then grade 12, adrenal gland. The adrenal gland, it's just above the kidneys. The first hormone there is adrenaline. Function increases heartbeat, blood pressure, conversion of glycogen to glucose, decreases blood flow of digestive to the digestive system in the skin. Take note, grade 12s, adrenaline works with your nervous system, your autonomic nervous system when it comes to the fight or flight. Then also aldosterone is our second hormone. There is a target organ, which is the kidney, and it regulates the salt concentration in the blood. Then the thyroid gland, grade 12, the last one here on top. Thyroid gland, which is situated here at the throat. Hormone thyroxine controls the basic metabolic rate. I just want to do something quickly. Just bear with me, grade 12s. I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute. Share again so that I have more control on my screen. Okay. Now, again, grade 12's reminder, you need to know the location of the glands, which hormone they secrete, and their functions. Now, when we know the location for different glands and hormones and what they secrete, we need to understand the process of homeostasis. That's number 3 on page 17, grade 12. Number 3 on page 17. Now, you must be able to define homeostasis, the definition. It's the process of maintaining a constant internal environment. Grade 12, I want you to highlight in your booklet, constant internal, maintaining a constant internal environment. And how is that done? By utilizing negative feedback mechanism. Now, you should understand what does it mean when we talk about negative feedback mechanisms. And this is how our human body operates. It detects an imbalance. If something is imbalanced, our body needs to maintain homeostasis. So when there's an imbalance, negative feedback mechanisms come into play. So to control your internal environment and to restore balance. You should be able to understand the negative feedback mechanisms. And if you follow in the booklet, first negative feedback mechanism we're going to discuss is how does TSH and thyroxine, when there is a imbalance of thyroxine, how does this work? Now, you have a diagram on page 18. We're going to look at it twice. You also have a table there. So your flow diagram is talking about how negative feedback mechanisms involve TSH and thyroxine, thyroid stimulating hormone and thyroxine. Now, if there's an imbalance, grade 12, now I want you to take your pencil and your pen and you must follow the numbering. First imbalance. So you would have this table, table number 5. Table number 5. Now I want you to follow on table number 5, but also work with your diagram because you need to understand, be able to write the description and also to deal with specific diagrams. So let's go back to the flow diagram. Our first scenario is imbalance. Thyroxine levels are too high. Thyroxine levels are too high. So what happens? Number 1, and number it, grade 12, number 1. The hypophysis is stimulated. Remember, the hypophysis, another word for the hypophysis, is our pituitary gland. Number 2, the hypophysis secretes less TSH. Keyword there, less TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. Follow the arrow. So from 2, less TSH will then go to the thyroid gland. So low TSH will go to the thyroid gland. Number 4, the thyroid gland will then secrete less thyroxine. And this will then decrease the level of thyroxine in your bloodstream. This and your thyroxine will then go back to normal. One more time, grade 12s. 1, hypophysis. What happens in the hypophysis? And you must follow in table 5. Hypophysis is stimulated. 2, what is the consequences? Which hormone? Less TSH. Number 3 will go to the thyroid gland. So low TSH will stimulate the thyroid gland. Number 4, less thyroxine will then be secreted by the thyroid gland. And this will lower the thyroxine levels, and the thyroxine levels will go back to normal. Take note, grade 12's thyroxine levels is high. Look at the negative feedback. Less TSH, less thyroxine. Thyroxine levels go back to normal. So there's a couple of diagrams, grade 12, that will help you to understand this process, because you need to be able to understand this. If the thyroxine levels is above normal, and this diagram, grade 12, you'll see in your mind the gap, and it follows in steps. But I want you to focus on the table that's given to you, table number 5. So let's go through the steps. Thyroxine levels is above normal. Thyroxine levels is above normal. Hypophysis is stimulated. Pituitary gland or hypophysis, less TSH. Grade 12, look at the keywords. Above normal, less TSH. Thyroid gland, less thyroxine. Thyroxine levels go back to normal. So if you look at table number 5, what should you highlight? Hypophysis is stimulated. Hypophysis, there is our keywords, less TSH. Low TSH levels are stimulated to the thyroid gland. Thyroid gland secretes less thyroxine. Thyroxine levels go back to normal. It decreases. Highlight that, grade 12. Highlight that. Our second scenario. First, which imbalance are there? What's the imbalance? Thyroxine levels are too low. Now follow my diagram. And now, grade 12, I want you to either use a different pen or a pencil or a highlighter. And in the same flow diagram, now we're following it a different way. Number 1. And again, grade 12, I go back to our table. 2 scenarios we've done with the first column here. We are here in this column now on page 18. You highlight the keywords while I'm going through the diagram. 1, hypophysis is stimulated. 2, more TSH is produced by the hypophysis. 3, thyroid gland is stimulated by the high thyroxine TSH, by the high TSH. 4, more thyroxine is secreted by the thyroid gland. And this increases the levels of thyroxine in the bloodstream, and it will return then back to normal. Take note, grade 12s, the imbalance was low thyroxine levels. The negative feedback mechanism is to bring it back to normal. So 1, hypophysis is stimulated. 2, Remember what was the imbalance? Thyroxine levels is low. So more TSH is secreted by the hypophysis. Higher levels of TSH is stimulating the thyroid gland. Number 4, the thyroid gland will secrete more thyroxine, bringing the thyroxine levels, increasing it to go back to normal. And again, grade 12s, this is in your mind a cap showing another type of flow diagram. It's exactly the same as the table that you have received, but just it's in steps. So make sure when you are studying the negative feedback mechanism for involving TSH and thyroxine, you note both scenarios when thyroxine levels increase above normal or when thyroxine levels decrease below normal. I hope all of you have highlighted what is the keywords when we are talking about above normal and what is the keywords when we are talking about below normal. You need to be able to analyze a diagram and also write the descriptions. Lastly, with the thyroid gland, you also have to understand there is thyroid disorders or there's a defect in your thyroid. Now, in your booklet, you can follow. An element called iodine is very important. It's essential for the production of thyroxine. Remember, the thyroid gland secretes thyroxine, but it needs iodine to be efficient when it comes to secreting or production of thyroxine. So a shortage of thyroid, of iodine. So iodine deficiency means there's a shortage. You don't have enough iodine in your diet. This causes the thyroid gland to enlarge. You see here's the diagram, and that's called a goiter. So when you ask to describe this, how does a goiter come about? It's when you have an iodine deficiency, which means that iodine, there's a shortage of iodine in your blood, in your thyroid gland, and this can cause an enlargement. This shortage can cause either too much or too little thyroxine, and this can lead to a goiter. Take note of the diagram and take note of how you should describe what is meant by a goiter, and you are able to identify it's a thyroid disorder and it's a defect. Now, grade 12, we are going to some questions. I want you to turn to your booklet on page 28. On page 28. And in your booklet, in your booklet, you'll see that your question states, the diagram below represents negative feedback mechanism, And when we are dealing with questions in the exams, we highlight because that is a clue, negative feedback mechanism. Y and X and Y represents hormones secreted by respective glands. Remember what I said earlier when we were busy with our slide, grade 12s, that you need to know which hormones, which glands, and their functions. So first thing I want you to do, grade 12s, pencils. We don't go to the questions as yet. We label our diagram. We analyze our diagram. So our diagram gives us some information. The pituitary gland, thyroid gland. So there is arrow showing that X is coming from the pituitary gland. So another name for the pituitary gland, grade 12, is the hypophysis. So I want you to write down, label which hormone do you think X is? Label it on your booklet, please, before we go to the question. Then thyroid gland, which hormone is affecting the pituitary gland? So please, grade 12, which hormones are X and Y? Before we go to the question, quickly label that. Which hormones is X and Y? And if we've done that, grade 12, that will help us with understanding the question. Five point one. What is the role of any negative feedback mechanism in the human body? What is the role of any negative feedback mechanism in the body? 5.2, and there it's highlighted. Now remember, grade 12s, on page 24 in your booklet, all of these keywords are explained to you. What does it mean we talk about identify and explain and how you should answer it? So identify hormone X, and if you have labeled your diagram before the time, then question 5.2 will be easy to answer. Then 5.3, and it's a higher order question. Explain the consequence of a person if hormone Y remained abnormally high. And the 12th, there is the keyword. Hormone Y is abnormally high, so it has increased above normal in extended periods of time. 3 marks. So grade 12, these 3 questions will only take you 5 minutes. It's now approximately 56 minutes, 58 minutes past 9. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to quickly try to answer these questions. Use your booklet. Try to answer it without your booklet also. And then we'll deal with the answers. So please, colleagues, make sure the learners are answering these questions as quickly as possible. 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3. It should only take you 5 minutes. Okay, grade 12s, are we writing? I hope we are writing down. And while you are busy, I will highlight specific keywords in 5.1 as well. Okay, I think the only place that we might take some time is probably in 5.3, but 5.1 and 5.2 should not be a problem. Okay, let's look at the answers, grade 12. Let's look at the answers. 5.1. What is the role of any negative feedback mechanism in the human body? Remember, grade 12s, negative feedback is how our body controls homeostasis or regulate homeostasis. So there is 3 possible answers in 5.1. It's to maintain an internal balance. There is a tick for that. If you wrote it maintains internal balance, you will get it correct. It sets a point or sets or regulates homeostasis, or it regulates your metabolism. It regulates your metabolism. Now, grade 12s, it's 1 mark, and the key there is maintain. The key, maintain homeostasis, maintain an internal balance. Then 5.2. Now, if I go back to the diagram, grade 12s, if you wrote here, which hormone is coming from the pituitary gland, TSH, can I ask that we put off our mics? Reminder. Thank you very much, colleagues. And if you put in your diagram which hormone is coming from the thyroid gland, thyroxine, and it's labeled there, then 5.2 would not have been a problem. 5.2 is asking us, identify the hormone X. It's acceptable to write TSH or in full, thyroid stimulating hormone. Now, because a clue or a hint, if you're struggling to there's another school who have his mic on. Can we please put over mics? Thank you very much. I've done that. Let's continue. If you are struggling, grade 12s, with spelling thyroid stimulating hormone, the clue to you is it's acceptable to write TSH. But be careful, don't write THS, then that means something totally differently. 5.3, our higher order question. Now, if I go back to our diagram, grade 12s, if you have labeled your diagram and you knew that hormone Y is thyroxine, and your question is stating hormone Y, which is thyroxine, have increased, then the table that we have discussed earlier comes into play now. Thyroxine levels have increased to a higher level. That's the first statement. Metabolism is higher than normal. Heart rate will increase. Thus, all the energy of food are used, leaving nothing to be utilized for storage. That means it could lead to a person being underweight, also can lead to anxiety. If we go back to the question, this could be very confusing. 5.3 is not asking you to explain how thyroxine will go back to normal. 5.3 is asking you what will happen, the consequence of the person if the thyroxine is abnormally high. And that can be a confusion when you are writing in the exam. So make sure, grade 12s, that you understand the question. So consequence, if thyroxine is very high, metabolism can be higher than normal, your heart rate can increase, all the energy from food eaten can be used up, leaving nothing to be utilized for storage. Therefore, it can lead to a person being underweight, can also lead to anxiety, any 3. Are we grade 12s? I hope all of us understood or are on par with that question. Let's go back to our slide. Now, remember I said to you, homeostasis is to maintain a constant internal environment. You also accept to understand or accept to be able to explain homeostasis in between TSH and thyroxine or thyroxine levels. You also need to be able to understand and explain factors that need to be maintained, such as the level or the concentration of carbon dioxide in your body, the level of or how much glucose you have, the salt concentration in your bloodstream, water concentration, and how your body regulates temperature. Now, we are on from page 19 to 20 in our booklets now. Now, the first one I want to talk about is the glucose levels. The glucose levels. The glucose levels is sugar levels in your body. Now, table number 6 is on page 19. So you need to understand that when glucose levels in your bloodstream have increased above normal, how would you explain this now?
Continue on the Continue on the
I must this lady talking off the clock.
Now you mute your thingy again. Mute yourself.
Grade 12s, please, let's keep our mics off and let's concentrate. I want you to highlight while we are busy with this on table number 6 in your booklet, because there are key things that you need to understand and need to be able to write down when you are asked these questions. So when glucose levels have increased, which control center? The pancreas. Which gland? The pancreas. Which gland? Pancreas are stimulated. Which hormone? I like grade 12s. It secretes insulin. Now I want you to make an arrow there, grade 12s, an arrow. Insulin is when glucose have increased into the blood. Insulin then goes to a target organ, the liver. And the liver is then stimulates the conversion of glucose into glycogen. So highlight which gland? Pancreas. Which hormone? The insulin. Target organ? Liver. And what is the function? Highlight. It converts glucose into glycogen. Glucose levels will then decrease and return back to normal. The same with when glucose levels have decreased. What is your gland? Pancreas. Highlight. Which hormone? Glucagon. The pancreas will secrete glucagon. Target organ. Glucagon is then transported to the liver. It's our target organ. And what does our target organ do? It stimulates the conversion of stored glycogen into glucose. Take note, grade 12, glucagon is when glucose levels have decreased. Glucose levels will therefore increase and return back to normal. Now this diagram is coming from your mind the gap. And yet again, look at the arrows and take note of in the table that's given to you We want normal glucose levels in our bloodstream, but when it increases, can you see? Which gland? Pancreas. Which hormone? Insulin. Target organ? Liver. What does the liver do? Converts glucose to glycogen. What's the consequence? Glucose levels will decrease and then it will go back to normal. Follow the arrows. Starting off, everything is normal, grade 12s. When glucose level decrease, target organ or target gland, which gland? Pancreas. Which hormone? Glucagon. Where is it going? The liver. What does the liver do? Glycogen is converted to glucose. And if glycogen is converted to glucose, it increases the glucose levels, which will then have a negative feedback effect, bringing the glucose levels back to normal. Confusion normally in this part, grade 12, is the fact that we get confused on which hormone. So here's a nice, beautiful diagram where it's numbered, because grade 12s, you might receive this in a diagram form, or you need to be able to describe. And just the numbering. Glucose levels have increased, so I've eaten a nice muffin, and now the glucose levels in my bloodstream is high. Which gland? Pancreas. Which hormone? Insulin. Where does the insulin go? The liver. And the liver then stimulates the conversion of glycogen, of glucose to glycogen, and the glucose levels in the blood will decrease. What is the set point? We want homeostasis. Vice versa with this. Glucose level in the blood decrease. Which gland? The pancreas. Which hormone? Take note of this. Glucagon. Where does the glucagon go? The liver, our target organ. What does the target organ do? It stimulates the conversion of glycogen to glucose. What does that do? The consequence, the blood glucose will rise, which gives us a set point, or which want homeostasis. Now, grade 12s, on page 28 and 29, question 6. Question 6. And this is a scientific investigation, and a lot of reading to do. So please, grade 12s, I want you to read with me. And when we are reading, we are highlighting certain things. Now, in your booklet in page 19, just at the bottom of page on table 6, you also need to be able to define diabetes mellitus, which is a metabolic disease that is characterized when there's a high glucose levels in the blood. High glucose levels in the blood. So the person is diabetes mellitus, there's a high glucose level in the blood. So I hope all of us have started reading. All of us have started reading. And there's the question. Let's do it slow. People with type 1 diabetes mellitus are usually insulin dependent. They are insulin dependent, which means they must inject themselves with insulin to control their blood glucose levels. Remember, grade 12s, diabetes mellitus means the person have a high glucose level, and that's why the hormone they're talking about here is insulin. High glucose, insulin. Have to control the blood glucose levels. And what does the insulin do? It must bring back, must decrease the glucose levels back to normal. So during a stressful situation, adrenaline is also secreted, which has the same effect as glucagon on the blood glucose levels. So remember, what does glucagon? So let's highlight insulin. Highlight insulin. But also we must know that when it's diabetes mellitus, glucose levels is high. Insulin. Highlight glucagon. Remember, if glucagon is there, what does glucagon do? So adrenaline have the same effect as glucagon. So now we have to think, what is the job of glucagon? Glucagon means it increases the glucose levels. In an investigation, so I hope grade 12s you are taking note of this. These keywords in the question are giving you hints and also will help you to answer the questions that follows. So in the investigation, determine the influence of adrenaline on the glucose levels of a type 1 diabetics who were also glucagon deficient. Also glucagon deficient. They also didn't have enough glucagon. The investigation was conducted as follows. So here, what was the aim? Determine the influence of glucose levels on type 1 diabetics. So there's the investigation. 100 males or 100 male patients with type 1 diabetes mellitus were also glucagon deficient, participated in the investigation. Now, grade 12s, listen. Insulin, glucagon, it's the two hormones. Glucose, glycogen is the sugars. The second bullet, they were then given the same amount of food and water, and when I'm busy with a scientific investigation, when there is same amount, these are our controls, our fixed variables. So take note of that, highlight that, because we don't know if they are going to ask us anything about fixed variables or control. Their blood glucose levels were measured on the morning of the third day. A solution of low concentration adrenaline was then administered intravenously. So it was injected. After 20 minutes, the blood glucose concentration in each person was measured again. The blood glucose levels before and after administration of adrenaline were compared. Now, grade 12s, please, when we are dealing with a scientific question like this, make sure you read all the information. Please read all the information. Don't skip the information, because when we get to the questions, and question 6 have a lot of higher order questions. 6.1, name the gland that secretes glucagon. Now there's no diagram here, but you have highlighted certain things. So that's why I've dealt with so many diagrams with this. I'm going to deal with a lot of diagrams, because you might get the diagram, you have to know the diagram, visualize it, but you also might get questions where there's no diagram, you can't see, so you must know the location of the gland and which hormone it secretes. Then our higher order questions, 6.2, identify the independent variable in this investigation. Now, independent variable, forgot to mention that, grade 12s. When there is a scientific investigation question and you're reading all of the information, while you are reading, try to identify what is the independent variable, what is the dependent variable. And please, by now, you should know how to get to the independent variable and the dependent variable and the fixed variable. I spoke about that when you were reading the question. Also, they might ask you to formulate an hypothesis, and that's why I said highlight the aim as well. 6.3, state 3 factors that should be kept constant. I hope you are taking note, grade 12s, during this investigation. 6.4, explain why the blood glucose levels were measured before injecting adrenaline on the third day. 6.5, explain why the adrenaline was injected instead of giving it orally. Remember that word, intravenously. Why was it injected and not even orally? 6.6, explain why the expected results after adrenaline was injected into the patients. And then 6.7, give a reason for the use of 100 patients in the investigation instead of only 10 patients. Now, I want to do this question with you. I want to do this question with you, grade 12. I want you to follow. 6.1, let's go to the answer. Remember, which gland, which hormone? They asked you the gland that secretes glucagon. The gland is, you can either say the islets of Langerhans, which is found in the pancreas, Glucagon and insulin is secreted by the pancreas. Then 6.2, identify the independent variable. Identify the independent variable. So what is the independent variable? Adrenaline. Why do you think they said it's adrenaline? 6.3. So the independent variable, grade 12, is the one we can manipulate, né? The one we can change. Dependent variable is the one we measure. 6 state 3 other factors that are kept constant, so are fixed variables, So you see grade 12s in the answer, they say same on top. So that word same appeared also in your description. So if you have highlighted that already, then it's easy for you. 3 factors, so there's a lot. The same type of food given, the same concentration of adrenaline, the same amount of adrenaline, the same measuring tools, the same person measuring the glucose concentration, the same levels of activity, the same age of the patient, same body mass of the patients, and the same health conditions of the patient. And any three of those. So if I go back to my question, grade 12s, same amount of food and water, same time of, it's there, it's in your, it's given to you. Then 6.4. Explain why the glucose levels were measured before injecting the adrenaline. It's to establish a control, providing a baseline or to have a starting level or to a point of reference. But the one we normally tell you in the class is to establish a control, to compare with the injected adrenaline. Grade 12s, I hope you've taken note that with this, the trend, the investigations are going in. They are talking about the variables, they are talking about control.
Imagine you cover your work.
6.5. 6.5. Grade 12, please put off your mic. Grade 12, please put off your mic. Thank you very much. 6.5. Explain why the adrenaline was injected instead of given orally. Hormones are proteins. Remember in the slide that I spoke about hormones are proteins and will therefore be digested, making it ineffective. And or since it enters the blood directly, it will reach the target organs faster. I like the second one. We spoke about hormones are secreted in the bloodstream directly. So why is the adrenaline injected into the person? It goes directly into the bloodstream and it will reach the target organs faster. The first one is talking about if it is digested or denatured, making it ineffective. So if I eat it. I hope you all are still following. 6.7. Give a reason for the use of 100 patients in the investigation instead of only 10 patients. Now, if we look at the number 100 and compare it with 10, it means increase the sample size. And that reminds us of reliability. Remember, grade 12s? Reliability and validity. Validity is about the controlled variables, keeping things the same. But reliability is about repeating the investigation, or in this case, they're giving you a hint, they have increased the sample size. So from 10 to 100, it means something has increased sample size. So that's all to do with reliability. Are we good? Can we continue to our next negative feedback mechanism? Practice questions, practice and practice grade 12s. Our next one is water concentration. Water concentration. And water concentration is table number 7 on page 20. Table number 7 on page 20. Negative feedback mechanism controlling how much water you have in your body or how much water you have in your bloodstream. So again, grade 12, there are steps. If there's more water and if there's less water. Now here, the hypothalamus is stimulated and it sends an impulse to the hypophysis. Take note of this. Hypophysis secrete less or stop secreting the hormone. So yes, we said in the beginning, in most of the textbook, they talk about hypothalamus and then ADH. But the hypothalamus is part of your brain, so it sends an impulse to the hypophysis, the gland, and the gland hypophysis then will secrete ADH. So more water, less ADH. So which gland? We accept if you write hypothalamus or you write hypophysis. Which hormone? Less ADH or no ADH. Look at the negative feedback grade 12s. More water, highlight it. Less ADH. What is the target organ? Kidneys. Now inside the target organ, and this is normally a sticky area for most grade 12s. You've forgotten your grade 11 work, ne? The collecting ducts and the distal convoluted tubules in the kidney. So the tubules in the kidney becomes less permeable to water. This bullet grade 12s, this should be linked to what you still understand when you dealt with the kidney in grade 11. So less ADH, less water will then be reabsorbed and will pass to the blood vessels. Then more water will be excreted in the urine, meaning the water level will be going back to normal. Be careful with this description. If there's less water than normal, Which gland? Hypothalamus, or part of your brain, hypothalamus. It sends an impulse to your hypophysis, which secrete which hormone? ADH. ADH will go to which target organ? Kidneys. And what's happening in the kidneys? The tubules will become more permeable. Look at the difference here, grade 12s. More water, it's less permeable. Less water, it is more permeable. Highlight it in your booklet, which then constitutes that more water will be reabsorbed and passed to the surrounding blood vessels. Look at the differences in your table. Less water, hypophysis secretes 8. Hypothalamus is stimulated. Hypophysis secretes more ADH. More ADH will go to which target organ? Kidneys. What's happening in the kidneys? Tubules, more permeable, which then makes more water to be reabsorbed into the bloodstream. That will have less water will be increased, so excreted in the urine, and the water level will then go back to normal. Now you must be able to deal with these descriptions, grade 12s, and practice. A diagram, because sometimes they give you a diagram. Sometimes they give you a diagram. So in the middle of this diagram, water content is normal. So let's look at the first scenario in your table, the first column. So I want you to have it in front of you and correlate with the diagram, follow the arrows. So you drank too much water. So now the water content in your bloodstream is high. That will stimulate the hypothalamus, and hypothalamus will send the impulse to the hypophysis to secrete less ADH. The ADH will then target the kidney to have a lower reabsorption of water. And this will increase the output of urine. So more urine will be then increased. Output will be high. And because of that, the water content in your blood will go back to normal. It will decrease and will go back to normal. Now you start sweating, or you have too much salt in your bloodstream. So the water in your blood will now, content in your blood will become low. And because it's low, it stimulates the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus sends a signal or an impulse to the hypophysis, which then secrete more ADH. And more ADH will then target the kidney. And then the kidney will reabsorb a higher volume of water, which lowers the urine output, lower urine, which will then bring the water content back to normal. Another diagram that might appear. Grade 12s. I'm dealing with so many diagrams and descriptions because we do not know what you will get when you're writing paper 1. This diagram is coming from your Mind Cap, and again, the arrows is very important. Normal water levels, water level will, the increase is the first one here, increase. So now hypothalamus is stimulated to send an impulse to the pituitary gland, which secretes less ADH. That makes the collecting ducts and the still convoluted tubules to become, they decrease the permeability, they become less permeable, and that have more water is lost, so less water is reabsorbed into the blood. And also vice versa. Go through these diagrams, grade 12, and study it with table number 7. Next, salt concentration. Salt concentration. If you have too much salt, the salt level in your bloodstream is too much. And this is table number 8, grade 12. Table number 8, 3.1.4 in your booklet, which is page 20. Again, grade 12. When salt is high, which gland? The adrenal gland is stimulated. First, the receptor cells in the kidney detects the high salt levels, so high sodium slash, because we're going to talk about sodium ions the whole time now. If sodium ions is just slash saying salt. So which gland? The adrenal gland is stimulated. The adrenal gland, which hormone will stop secreting aldosterone, or less aldosterone will be secreted. Look at the negative feedback, grade 12. Increase, less aldosterone. Less aldosterone, the reabsorption of salt or sodium ions in the renal tubules of the kidney will decrease. What is your target organ? The kidneys. Let's have sodium ion concentration in your blood to decrease, and it goes back to normal. Let's do that again. The question you should ask yourself, if the imbalance is the salt level is high or has increased, which gland? Adrenal gland. Which hormone? Aldosterone. How much of that hormone? Less aldosterone. What is the target organ? Kidney. What happens in the kidney? Reabsorption of sodium, decrease in the renal tubules. The imbalance is now back to normal. How? Sodium ion concentration will then decrease and return back to normal. When salt levels in the bloodstream decrease, grade 12, again, question you need to ask yourself, which gland? Adrenal gland, or the control center, adrenal gland. First, the imbalance is detected. Remember, I'm not skipping these bullets because they are not important. I'm just helping you to follow the order that you will, when you are writing the description, that you are following that order, that within your description, these are the important things you must take note of. All of these bullets are important, grade 12s. So I ask myself, which gland is stimulated by this imbalance? Adrenal gland. Which hormone? Aldosterone. How much of this hormone? The adrenal gland will secrete more aldosterone. Again, grade 12, I'll repeat myself. Imbalance is talking about decrease. The hormone will be more. What's the target organ? The kidney, specific the renal tubules in the kidney. And what happens in the kidney? What does the target organ do? The reabsorption of sodium ions from the blood vessels will increase. Do you take note, grade 12? Imbalance was decrease, is increase. That means the sodium concentration in the bloodstream will increase and will return back to normal. Again, in your mind, the gap, you will find this diagram. And my hint to you, grade 12, is always have a visualize what is happening. The kidney, the receptor cells of the kidney will detect any imbalance. But which gland is stimulated? There you see the adrenal glands, they are stimulated. So when the imbalance is the salt level increase, which hormone? Aldosterone. How much aldosterone? Less. You see, where is the aldosterone going? The aldosterone goes to the kidney. And the kidney will reabsorb sodium ions, less of it. It will decrease. That means the salt level will decrease and salt will go back to normal. Salt, sodium -12. And the same with when the salt level have decreased. Visualize. Target organ is the kidney. Gland is the adrenal glands. Hormone, aldosterone. Question number 7, grade 12. Question number 7. Question number 7. Study the flow diagram of homeostatic mechanism used to regulate the concentration of salt in your body. And this question is on page 29. On page 29. On page 29. Now, grade 12, what I want you to do is you need to, when you're seeing this diagram, can you see it looks similar to our diagram we just looked at? Analyze the diagram, follow the arrows. Wherever you see something that you need to write down, like for example, what is gland B, what is hormone C, write it down on your diagram. What is the effector response? What is the effector response E? Write it down within your diagram so that when we get to the questions, and the questions is on the next page, that you are equipped. Remember, if we analyze or label our diagram before the time, then the questions are easier. Okay, let me do this question with you. Just for time's sake. Question 7.1, give the name of the following organ A, gland B, and hormone C. Organ A, gland B, and hormone C. Organ A, so target organ necrotos is the kidney. Organ A is the kidney. The receptors in the kidney are stimulated. Gland B. Gland B stops to secrete hormone C. Gland B starts to secrete. So remember the question I said to you earlier, grade 12, which gland? And our gland is our adrenal gland. And then number C is easy. Which hormone? Aldosterone. Then question 7.2, describe, there's the word describe, the response of the effector at D. Describe the response of the effector at D. Be careful. Now you have to look at the diagram. Imbalance was a decrease of salt. So what will be the response here at the end to get the salt levels back to normal? The renal tubules, the wall of the renal tubules become more permeable. See, salt levels was less, more permeable, allowing for greater reabsorption of sodium ions from the filtrate into the capillaries. Now, if I can refer you back, grade 12s, to the response, there, this bullet. That question is talking about this bullet. Are we clear? Okay. Carbon dioxide. You need to be able to understand carbon dioxide. So the negative feedback of carbon dioxide, there's a paragraph, grade 12. Make sure you highlight certain parts. Remember, carbon dioxide is not needed to us, so it's only going to be about carbon dioxide increase during or after exercise. Chemoreceptors in the wall of the aorta highlight are stimulated. These receptors sends a nerve impulse to the respiratory and cardiovascular centers in the medulla oblongata. Highlight. The medulla oblongata sends a nerve impulse to the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles. These muscles will then interact actively and increases the rate and depth of breathing. The cardiovascular center sends impulses to the heart, and the heart will then beat faster. Carbon dioxide is transported faster to the lungs and exhaled. Now, the 12s, you must be able to write the description and also be able, like in this diagram, keywords in your description is carbon dioxide levels increase, will never decrease. If we decrease, we breathe out. So increase will be the imbalance. Stimulus will go to the medulla oblongata and the aorta, the heart. You must be able to explain what happens in the medulla oblongata and the aorta. And the response the response medulla oblongata will send impulses to the diaphragm and intercostal muscles. So the medulla oblongata will send impulses to the intercostal muscles and the diaphragm, which will increase the rate of breathing. Therefore, carbon dioxide levels will then decrease. Thermoregulation. Before we go to thermoregulation, grade 12s, make sure you study this whole paragraph, please, so that you are able to describe when carbon dioxide levels have increased. Thermoregulation, temperature control, grade 12, temperature control or temperature regulation. You see my picture? When we get cold or when we get hot, if temperature increase, if temperature decrease. Now there are key things in thermoregulation that you need to be able to highlight. The role of sweating, vasodilation, those keywords, vasoconstriction. Now, grade 12s, in your booklet on page 21, you must be able to define what is thermoregulation. What is meant by thermoregulation? You need to control body temperature. You must keep it at close to or at 37 degrees. So your body temperature is regulated. Now I want you to highlight this, grade 12s. Your body temperature is regulated by your hypothalamus. And you must study the structure using this diagram, the structure of the skin. Now, there's an easy way, grade 12s, to deal with this. Same way we dealt with the other negative feedback. The hypothalamus is the keyword. What happens with the blood vessels? Second keyword. Third keyword, sweat glands. And then more sweat or less sweat. Take note, grade 12. Hypothalamus, blood vessels. I'll repeat again, grade 12. Temperature control. It's regulated by the hypothalamus. There are key concepts when you are explaining temperature control in your body. Hypothalamus is the key term. Blood vessels. Sweat gland. More sweat or less sweat. Or how much sweat. So let's start with on a hot day. Hypothalamus is stimulated. It sends an impulse to the blood vessels. Now take note of the diagram, grade 12s. The blood vessels, something needs to happen to the blood vessels. They become wider. They dilate. Look at the diagram. They are wider. And this is called vasodilation. Remember I said earlier, vasodilation. So what is meant by vasodilation? The blood vessels become wider. And if they become wider, more blood will flow into the skin. More blood will flow into the skin. More heat is lost. More blood is sent to the sweat glands. What happens to the sweat glands? They become more active. Look at the sweat glands, they become more active. And if they become more active, diagram, more sweat is released and it's evaporated to cool the skin down. On a cold day, hypothalamus stimulated, sends an impulse to the blood vessels. Look at what the blood vessels look like when on a cold day. They are constricted. They became narrower. This is called vasoconstriction. Vasoconstriction. And if they are constrict or narrower, less blood will flow to the skin. Less heat will be lost. Less blood will be sent to the sweat glands. Here we go to the sweat glands. If less blood goes to the sweat glands, the sweat glands becomes less active, meaning no or less sweat will be released. There will be less evaporation and less skin. Grade 12, if you take note in this explanation, on a hot day, look at the keywords, vasodilation and more blood, more heat, more. Sweat glands, more active. Sweat, more evaporation. And take note of the diagram. On a cold day, temperature have decreased. Vasoconstriction, highlight grade 12, highlight. Less blood flows into the blood vessels. Less heat is lost. Less blood is sent to the sweat glands. They become less active. Less sweat is released. Less evaporation. Keywords. And main fact, hypothalamus is regulating the temperature. We got that, grade 12s? Okay. We have approximately 35 minutes left of our session. We only have one part left and we are on page 21. Responding to the environment plants, grade 12. So we're just going to go through the plants. And please focus on what's in your revision booklet. Focus on what's in your revision booklet. Grade 12, you need to know which plant hormones and the general function of the plant hormones. I don't have all the functions as is on my slide, but in your booklet, you see that there are quite a few, at least 3. What is the function of the auxins? What's the function of the gibberellins? What's the function of abscisic acid? Now on my screen, auxins promotes growth. It stimulates cell division, cell elongation. All of those things are on your page. It plays a role in trophic movements. What does it mean by trophic movements? When we get into the diagrams, I will explain. Gabrielines, responsible for germination of seeds. It stimulates the growth of side branches. And then abscisic acid, grade 12. This is the one that will inhibit cell division and growth. It will inhibit germination of seeds. Remember, before we dealt with the endocrine system, we spoke about hormones. They will either stimulate or they will inhibit. Either stimulate or they will inhibit. So, but abscisic acid, it promotes the abscission of leaves and fruit. Leaves and fruit. Then there is a little paragraph 4.2 and does focus on that 2 bullets, grade 12, the control of weeds using plant hormones. And if you look at the 2 bullets, they are within my explanation. The first one, some kills plants but not others, so they are weed killers. They accelerate metabolism. They accelerate metabolism of dicotyledonous weeds and stimulate growth. They grow fast. That water absorption is insufficient. They can weaken plants. Plants can be weakened and then they die. That 2 bullets, grade 12, just focus on that. Now, the role of auxins. You must know the role of auxins when it comes to phototropism and geotropism. Now, the tropisms, grade 12s, that's 4.3 in your booklet. The tropisms, they are growth movements of plants in response to a stimulus. They are growth movements of plants in response to stimulus. In your booklet, I am at this point, just to page 22. There we go. The dogs, I'm here. So if I say growth movements, I'm at this point here. The role of auxins, you must be able to know the role of auxins in phototropism and geotropism. Now the first one I'm going to do is geotropism. That's at the bottom of phototropism. Now, with dogs, geotropism is a growth movement of plants in response to gravitation, a gravitational stimulus. Now you need to be able to explain why the root will grow downwards and why the stem will grow upwards. So take note. When we have a young seedling like this, and this picture is in your booklet, page 23. Roots will grow downwards and stems will grow upwards. Why? Because auxins, they will accumulate at the lower side. So they will accumulate at the lower side of the root and they will move towards gravity. So there will be a higher concentration on the lower side of the root, which will inhibit cell division and cell elongation. Cells on the upper side of the root will grow faster. That means the root will now curve downwards and the stem will grow upwards. If I go back to your booklet, There we go. Auxins will accumulate on the lower side of the stem, and the root will, because of auxins are attracted to gravity. This leads to an uneven distribution of auxins in the stem and the root. You get me, grade 12? I hope so. We'll deal with a question in a few minutes. So if we look at this example, if there is light everywhere, so now the roots will go down and the stems will go up because a higher concentration of auxins will be at the lowest root, and there will be a lower concentration here, so roots will go down and stems will grow up. That is what's happening. Auxins make the roots grow down and auxins make the stems grow upwards. The role of auxins in phototropism, grade 12s. Phototropism. Now, what I want to look at in the slide is mostly the picture here and the fact this is about unilateral light stimulus. Phototropism is the growth movement of plants or part of the plant because of unilateral light, meaning light is coming only from one side. So if I go back to your booklet quickly, because I want us to be very careful when we do these explanations. And your booklet have summarized it nicely for you. There we go. There is the statement. It's unilateral light stimulus in response. So stems will usually grow down towards light to absorb the maximum light for photosynthesis. So what happens to the growth of the stem? Because of keyword the unilateral light. Now this 4 bullets, grade 12s, please study them. Because if I go back to our slide and we look at the diagram, I'm going to read on my page here. If light is coming on from everywhere, you see in this diagram here, the stems will grow up and the roots will go down because the stems will go towards light. But now in this case, unilateral light is coming from only one side. So let's look at the first bullet in your booklet. Auxins will then move away from the light. They will move to this side and they will accumulate on this side. And these auxins here, they will stimulate, my second bullet, grade 12, they will stimulate cell elongation. Cells will start to divide and become longer. So this side will grow faster, meaning the stem will now curve in the direction of the light. Got it, grade 12s? Same with this diagram. If the light is coming from here, the auxins will move downwards, which means the stem will grow towards the light. But now, as light is moving only unilaterally from one direction, the auxins, they will move to the shaded part. They will stimulate cell elongation this side. And because of the cells are dividing and elongating here, the stem will bend towards light. And if you study those 4 bullets, grade 12, in conjunction with a diagram, then you have nothing to worry about. Then, lastly, also take note when we talk about geotropism, before we go to defense mechanisms. I just want to go back to the booklet. When we have this case, grade 12, where it's about geotropism, oxygens are attracted to gravity. Please take note of what is that 4 bullets, what's happening with the stem and what's happening in the root. I could explain it earlier to you, but highlight this 4 bullets. Highlight whenever you get a question, which might happen later on, regarding geotropism, what's happening in the stem and what's happening in the roots. Correct explanation, grade 12. Use the same word. Now, our next part, which is on our slide, is the role of chemicals and thorns as plant defense mechanisms. And these are plant defense mechanisms. So if I go back to my slide. Now, plants, they need to defend themselves because they want to grow. So there are 2 plant defense mechanisms, thorns and chemicals. There's a picture of our thorns. So sharp thorns, they will protect the plant against herbivores. Those are animals that eat plants. So that means there's less damage to by the herbivores to the plants, meaning the plant will then make sure it continues to grow. And also the thorns will now reduce water loss. With chemicals, many plants have produced chemicals that plays a role in defense against herbivores again and pathogenic organisms, meaning if they eat these chemicals, eat the plant, the chemicals are poisonous and it can influence the digestibility of the plant material. So when this worm maybe eat the plant, it might not be able to digest it. So it will avoid eating the plant with a chemical defense mechanism. Are we clear, grade 12? So in your booklet, there are 2 bullets for chemical and then 1 bullet for thorns. Just focus on that. Question 9, page 31. Question 9 on page 31. Diagram A shows an upright plant. Diagram B shows the same pot plant in 1 week after falling over. The plant was exposed to uniform light. And uniform light is light from all directions before and after it falls over. Uniform light. Just a reminder, grade 12s. Remember?
The fuck?
Uniform light is light from all directions. Unilateral light is light from one direction. Take note of that, because that can cause confusion. Uniform light is light from all directions, which is similar to what we are doing here. There's uniform light here because it's light from all directions. Plant fall over, what will happen? Got it? Now let's go to our booklet. Let's go to our booklet. Go to that question. And that is on page 31. Page 31. Okay, so the part that you should have highlighted, grade 12s, is uniform light here. And that also confused some learners in, this is an exam question paper, I remember this question. It confused because they were talking about uniform light. And if I go back to the slide, I just showed you that this diagram is linked to something. Not necessarily what you guys were thinking about. So make sure. If we talk about phototropism, it's unilateral light. So, yeah, name the tropism that is illustrated in this diagram B. Then 9.2, explain why the stem of the plant will bend upwards as illustrated in B. You see, it's bending upwards. You see here, bending upwards. 9.3, Explain the advantage that the upward bending of the stem could have for the plant. Then 9.4, state how the roots will be reacting in diagram B. Diagram B. Are we grade 12s? We have approximately 20 minutes left. 20 minutes left of our session. Let's try this question. Let's try this question. And remember from the slide what I've showed you. What kind of tropism is this? If you look at this plant, it's upright, there is light from everywhere, and when it's fallen over, the stem goes up and something will probably happen to the roots. What kind of tropism is this? In 9.2, explain why the stem will bend upwards. 9.3, the advantage of this of it bending up. 9.4, state how the roots will react. Okay, let's look at the answers because there's still one more thing I want to do before our session ends. I know I've skipped the question, grade 12s, but question 8 there by the carbon dioxide. Please take time and go and look through those questions. Let's finish plant hormones quickly. Let's finish plant hormones quickly. Which type of tropism is this? Geotropism. Geotropism, because the hint in the diagram is the stems grow up and the roots grow down, and light is coming from all directions. Take note of that, grade 12s. 9.2, explain why the stem of the plant will go upwards. Now, I want us to go back to the explanation. Because, grade 12s, sometimes we have the answer, but we seem to forget. Remember, I said to you here, these bullets are important. And the question was asking us why. So these bullets, when we are answering the questions pertaining in this specific scenario, take note of those 4 bullets. So explain why the stem bends upwards. You get a mark for talking about the auxins because the auxins are influencing geotropism. It accumulates at the lower part of the stem because of gravity. Look where the ticks are, grade 12s. A higher concentration of part of the stem stimulates cell elongation and the growth on the lower side of the stem, meaning the lower concentration of auxins is at the upper part of the stem, which inhibits cell growth. So, or you can say the growth of the upper side of the stem. But if you write that 4 bullets, grade 12, it will be accepted. 9.3. Explain the advantage that the upward bending of the stem might have. Because the stems and the leaves are bending upwards or going upwards, they will be carried in such a way which receive maximum sunlight for photosynthesis because they are going upwards. And remember, the question is stating that it is uniform light. So if they move upwards towards the uniform light, they will have maximum sunlight for photosynthesis. Then 9.4, state how the roots will react. Now, we can't see the roots here, but we understand that if the stems grow upwards, then the roots will go downwards towards gravity. The roots will grow downwards towards gravity. Now, we're not done yet, grade 12s. There's one more thing that I want to discuss in the last 15 minutes. But I just want to say to you that even though we've went through all of the topics in the three resource packages, that doesn't mean that you should now leave them and not revise through all of it. So I want to leave you with a couple of not advice, but some inspiration and motivation in preparation for your national exams. Remember, grade 12s, you didn't come this far to only come this far. You must study while others are sleeping, work while others are loafing, prepare while others are playing, and dream while others are wishing. Success all depends on the second letter, and the second letter here, grade 12s, you. Success depends on you. And lastly, education is the most powerful weapon which can be used to change the world. So it does not matter how much we preach and how much we explain to you. If you look at my 4 statements here, grade 12s, it's up to you. You need to put the gears on and start studying or revise as much as possible. But take note of the hints and the things that we have discussed with you. Now, before I know Mr. Farmer is going to have some sort of a revision session with you in preparation of for the exams. But I just want to remind you, grade 12s, that you have notes. You have a lot of resources for the NSC exams. You have notes, you have lesson plans, you have textbooks, you have a mind gap. Please do not forget about your exam guideline 2021, the new one. The resources that we have used, grade 12, during these sessions, it's excellent booklets. Please go through them. There's summaries for you. I feel like if you study only the notes in those booklets, that you are 80% or 70% ready for your exams. Telematics booklets, and now I'm talking about resources, but do not forget about the WCDE portal. There are links and advice, and there are things you can download. Lot of resources. Just to remind you, and this is coming from the exam guideline, grade 12, paper 1 is the 19th of November. Remember, paper 1 is 150 marks, and don't worry about the terms now here, just the topics. Reproduction in vertebrates, it's 8 marks. Human reproduction is 41 marks. Responding to the environment, which is the nervous system, the endocrine system, we've dealt with that. The nervous system specifically, 54 marks. Responding to the environment plants, the one we just dealt with, 13 marks. Endocrine and homeostasis, we dealt with that today, grade 12s. 34 marks. 34 marks. In your booklets that you have received, this is just a reminder. Make sure that you know your terminology. Start with your terminology. Start with your key concepts. Study all of the diagrams involving all of these topics. Practice the descriptions, grade 12s, please. Because you are able to get these marks if you prepare yourself adequately. Then paper 2, 22nd of November. Make sure that you know the topics. DNA code of life, 27 marks. Meiosis, 21 marks. Genetics and inheritance, 48 marks. Evolution, 54 marks. Grade 12s. Again, make sure that you know all of your terminology. all of your key concepts of these topics, all of the diagrams that is involved with all of these topics. Use your exam guideline. Use all the resources. Your both question papers are 2.5 hours. Remember when we were dealing with all of the questions that we have spoken about? 1 mark, 1 minute. Utilize, practice, get question papers, practice. Practice full question papers. And again, you didn't come this far to only come this far. Study while others are sleeping. Work while others are loafing. Don't loaf, grade 12s, please. Work. My statement I normally give my grade 12s is, we work till we drop, we sleep in December. So prepare while others are playing and dream while others are wishing. The success depends on you. If you are concentrating on your education, grade 12s, it's the most powerful weapon and you can change the world. Now, I will stop sharing now and I will open the line or for anyone to ask questions, anything during, because we have approximately 8 minutes left of this session. Any comments, anything I have to repeat, anything that you need Mr. Farmer to send you, to communicate with you, any resources that you feel like we should send you again. Reminder, all schools have received the notification that the 11th of November, Mr. Farmer is going to have a session regarding exam techniques and examination preparation. So please, the links will be available shortly. And I thank you very much for being able to host your tutor classes. And I hope grade 12s and my colleagues on my marking buddies, I see you the 10th of December, that I've helped you to prepare for the examination and that you are well equipped for the exams. The lines is open for any comments, for anything in the chat box. I will read it and respond to it. You may also use your mics if you want to respond to something. Thank you very much, grade 12s and all of the colleagues from the respective schools. We have about 6 minutes left, so I will be here for the next 6 minutes to just look if there's anyone who needs to repeat something or explain something again. If not, I will share the slide again and just go through everything that we have done today. Oh, Annalisa. Yes, Annalisa. While we are waiting for any response, let me just go through. We've done a lot this morning. We have 5 minutes left. We've done a lot this morning, so let me just go through everything. We've dealt with the endocrine system. We looked at what is the glands, exocrine, endocrine glands. We've looked at the definition of a hormone. You need to know the position and the functions of the glands, location and the hormones and the functions. We dealt with homeostasis and negative feedback, grade 12s, extensively. So I hope all of you. We first looked at the thyroid gland and the thyroid and hypophysis, how they involve with negative feedback. We've looked at both scenarios when thyroxine levels is high and when thyroxine levels is low. Take note of your booklet. We looked at the defect of the thyroid. We've dealt with the questions. We went through homeostasis of how we maintain carbon dioxide, glucose, salt concentration, water concentration, and temperature levels. Take note of the tables, the diagrams. This is glucose. We dealt with a question. We've discussed water concentration, how our body controls the water concentration. We looked at diagrams, salt concentration. Take note of the table in your booklet. Step by step, we looked at a question and a diagram. Carbon dioxide, and this is your homework, grade 12s. We've looked at carbon dioxide and some diagrams, and remember you must do a question in your booklet. Thermoregulation, keywords, hypothalamus, blood vessels, vasodilation and vasoconstriction, the sweat glands and what's happening. Take note of the diagram. Then we looked at plants and plant hormones, and we looked at the role of auxins in geotropism, the role of auxins in phototropism, how we explain what is happening during phototropism and geotropism. Take note of the diagram, what is meant by unilateral light, plant defense mechanisms, and again I'll repeat, uniform light and unilateral light. Take note of the differences. We dealt with a question and I left you with some anecdotes. And if there is no questions or comments, there's 2 minutes left. There's 2 minutes left. And I will still wait for any response. Reminder, the 11th of November, Mr. Farmer is going to have a session regarding techniques in preparation for examinations for the following week. The links will be available shortly. Please join Mr. Farmer, guys, with that, because I hope most of you are busy preparing for the exams. There's 1 minute left. Lastly, grade 12s and colleagues, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to host your tutor classes.
Ms. Mollies?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Now, I just want to use this opportunity to thank you for your dedication and your diligence for the last 2 months almost, hey? I really appreciate the effort that you put in preparing such clear and wonderful slides, and your attempt and your approach that you use for the tutoring. I really appreciate it. I'm going to stop the recording now, but I just want to again echo your words. I just heard from another tutor now as I was monitoring the other sessions, that grade 12s, this is your only opportunity. Nobody wants to repeat or rewrite next year, March or June. So this is your only opportunity to do well. So please use all the resources that are available to you. There are so many available. There are these recordings. You must contact your teachers, go online, look for past question papers, work through them, so that you are well prepared. All right. So this is our last session for the year, but Ms. Mali's mentioned that I will be having a session this coming week, Thursday the 11th, at about 3 o'clock, 3:15, for an hour or so, just to go through some exam tips and exam techniques. Seeing that Ms. Mullis and I are also markers at the end of the year, we know how we as markers approach the exams, and it's good if you could have an inside information, and some insight on how the markers will mark your question papers. Then you can actually score those extra marks, those extra 1 or 2 marks that will push you over to an 80%, for instance, or a pass mark. All right. So please continue to work through this weekend. Don't take any breaks. I won't say take any breaks. Don't take any breaks, but just try and pay attention to some of your studies this weekend. I always say that the party can wait, but for now, the date of the exams is set, right? So get over these exams first, and then you can relax. So thank you very much, Miss Malis. I appreciate it. And I'm sure I can count on you again for next year. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much. So you are all welcome now to leave. The recordings will be made available from Monday, Tuesday to the school teachers. If you want to go through this lesson again, you are more than welcome. Okay. Thank you.